Hey, what's happening? I'm here, and hopefully, so are you. This is Robert Phoenix, and welcome to another edition of Sunday Night Astro Live. And let's see, it's the 9th of January. We're well past 1 week. Well, just, well, yeah, well past, I guess. We're past a week, first week of the year. It's been a busy week on my end. Had three shows. We started the week off with three shows with Noreen Helphand over on Wild at Heart. And let me give a few plugs to the people that hosted me this last week. And I want to say thank you to them. And all three of them were really kind, gracious hosts. And you know, when I do shows with other people, it really gives me a sense of hope and faith in humanity. That having three separate dialogues with three really different entities in a lot of ways, and yet sharing a common language and a common uh, beat of the heart in many ways. And so let me just do that at the beginning of the show, and so I can give them some props and a little bit of love here. All right, let me go to YouTube and gonna find the Wild at Heart channel here. Give me one sec. How was everybody tonight? How y'all doing out there? So this is Noreen's channel. She's got a YouTube channel, and she actually streams live on Revolution Radio. I think it's 10 o'clock at night on Monday. That's 10 o'clock Western time. So you can see that Emily has been there, and Revolution Radio. That's at freedomslips.com. So that was the show that we did last Monday night, which was really a lot of fun. And her and Nick, really good hosts. And Noreen knows a fair amount about astrology too. So it's always good to be on a show where we speak the lingo. And then on Wednesday, I was over on Rockfin with Jeffrey Doherty, which I thought was a fantastic show. And let's do that. Let's kind of pull this up here, see what happens. So here we go. And we'll do a little shout out. The Christian whistleblower. I need to get Jeffrey on my show. Find out about his deconversion. So this is Jeffrey's Rockfin channel right there. So there I was, just coming off of the show with Young Pharaoh. How about that? Jeffrey had the Young Pharaoh logo on in the background. It's from 5 days ago. More Borg than Biden. I think Joe Biden is the model for the new human. It feels that way, doesn't it? Like with all the modifications. You coming up here? We got the Astrocat making an appearance. Yeah, we'll get you on here soon. Anyway, I was with Jeffrey on Wednesday night, right there, 4 days ago. And then on Friday evening, I was over on Twitch with, see if I can find Twitch here, with Giuseppe and Dave Scorpio. And that was a lot of fun. Those guys are great. I mean, they're all fun. Don't get me wrong. They're all good shows. But Giuseppe is fucking funny. He's really fun. He sent me a song that he just did. I'm going to play it tomorrow on my show tomorrow. So let me see if I can find Giuseppe here. Oh, look at that. Tor Says is live on Twitch. Twitch is wild, man. Twitch is wild. So here we go. This is Giuseppe's channel. It's called The Perfect Triangle. And again, like Noreen, they also live stream simultaneously. Well, Noreen doesn't. Noreen she'll stream on Rev Radio, and then she'll put the show up on YouTube. And Giuseppe and Dave, they stream live on Twitch and Rev Radio. And those guys are great. So I want to thank them for having me on and then promote their programming while I'm at it. So look who's here. There he is. The Astro Cat in the house. Man, Saturn's looking a little rough there, huh? Look at that. It's got a little chunk coming off the top of Saturn. Interesting. You are nuts. You're more Jupiter than Saturn. He's more Jupiter than Saturn. You kind of look like Jupiter. You got kind of the Jupiter stripes going on there. Yeah, you're Jupiter. You're getting big like Jupiter. Although Saxy Maxie, the porch cat, is really getting big like Jupiter. Man, he's getting a wide middle. So anyway, here we are. How are you? Let's see if I can put a link up on Twitter for tonight's shoe. Let's see, where am I here? I was watching a documentary on Gil Scott-Heron before the show. God, he was such a great artist. Freaking amazing. I can't believe that Clive Davis signed Gil Scott-Heron. Fucking Clive Davis signed everybody, man. I mean, everybody. I was going to look at Ray Parker Jr.'s chart tonight. I should do that. I got a bunch of charts lined up, but I didn't line up Ray Parker Jr. His chart is on Astro Theme, and it's kind of interesting because it gives you some insight into, well, astrology through his chart. Let me throw this up on Twitter, and we'll get going here. Yeah, I've got that song, The Bottle, in my head now. Do you guys know that too? It's a great song. All right, here we go. We are live on YouTube right now. Sunday night. Astro Live. There we go. Okay, let's put a little link in there. Looks like what, Bob Saget died. Is that right? Bob Saget dies at age 65. He's a full house guy, isn't he? It's not the show he was on. That's a weird show. So is Fuller House. The whole thing is weird. And these are people, honestly, I just can't relate to. I can't relate to these people. I didn't watch the show. I was never into Bob Saget as a like a comic or a personality. I don't know. Doesn't really affect me. Okay, here we go. Who we got? Hey, there she is, top of the class. The lovely and talented Joan S. Ayurveda and Astrology, AA here, Kabuki Theater. There's my man Robin, Bob Saget, RIP. Sorry, I hope I didn't dump on you there, Robin, with my Bob Saget comment. But did Bob Saget? Maybe. Miss BC, you're here too. Well, there you are. Susie Gemini, what's going on, Susie? Twilight Babe 123, Deanna M. Melissa T. Calick. What's going on, Melissa? Very busy for you. Good. Liz Atwell playing Soul Survivor down under. Boy, oh boy, Liz. I hope you're doing all right. Look, she's got a friendly emoji there. Friendly, happy emoji. Tom Jordan, sporting a wrench. What's going on, Tom? Good to see Ian Barber. Greetings, Ian. Cyber Sully. There's my antipodal astrological brother in stars, Mark Matheny. Mark is he is back to the land in it out there in Ohio. Got to catch up sometime, Mark. The introspective woodworker. There is Ryan, not Private Ryan. What kind of rank would we give Ryan if we had to give Ryan a rank? I'd say maybe Captain Ryan. Captain is respectable. Captain Ryan. Benito, there's my man. The Shadow Man is here. There is Trog Auto Egocrat 666. That is my man, Mark. What's going on, Mark? Good to see you. Sony is here. Hi, Sony. Let's see. Who else do we have? Christine Mose. There she is. Chiming in from what is that? 760? Was that 760? 760, 730? Duncan O'Finian, Super Soldier. What's going on, brother? Good to see you. Lana Anderson. There she is. Hey, on the go, mostly listening. Okay. Well, listening is allowed. Yeah, that was a good show with Jeffrey. I think Jeffrey was a little surprised in a few places. I think he was a little surprised. I like Jeffrey. I'm going to get him on the show. He's an interesting character. I want to get all three of those people on my show. They'll all be good guests. Susan Chappelle. Hello, Susan. Athene Chimenti. Athene Chimenti. Okay, Athene Chimenti. Is that it? Athene Chimenti? Duly noted. Tinfoil Tiara. What's happening? DJ MC. There you are. Happy New Year, Papa Mike. Andrea Garland. Checking in. Yeah, man, I really dig Dave and Giuseppe. Giuseppe he might have had the line of the year. I was talking about the mud flood, and he said, "Oh, is that when Big Mike? Is that happens after Big Mike takes care of Barry?" And I lost my shit. I thought that was so funny. If you guys know what he's talking about, right? He's talking about a different kind of mud flood. Oh my God. That was hilarious. Yeah, right. Good. I knew I would have some good synergy with those dudes. I knew it because one is a Scorpio and the other is a Virgo. So I've got the Virgo and the Scorpio rising. So that was happening. Let's see. Hi, PB. Glad to have you here. Love Light Energetics. Anyone else been super fed up lately? I think it's easy to be super fed up. When did we reach the tipping point? We might have reached the tipping point a year ago. I mean, for me, the tipping point was a year ago. And now it's about how we get through being fed up and living past the tipping point. Let's see. Who else do we have? Leon Luis. What's going on now? Leon, isn't it your birthday? I think it might be your birthday. I know Leon is a Capricorn, but I think it might even be your birthday. If not, we're going to get out in front of it and wish you a happy birthday, unless we're behind it, in which case it's a retrograde happy birthday. Fifth wall, there's Kestrel. What's going on, Kestrel? And she's got it. She's got a wrench. Don't be afraid to use it. Jolie Wells. Hi, Jolie. I love Jupiter is great, right? There's my man, Maurice and Steve, Mr. Thor by the door. I'm going to call you tomorrow for a catch up and to give you some news that might blow you away. I'm always open to being blown. We should always be open to being blown away. If you're not being open to blown away, you're not living. I used to have an RPG. What did Steve say here? Oh, the Crimmies are here. Marianne's artistic career is taking off. You and Chris Crimmy have shifted into the fine art world. Pretty soon, your faces will be on the covers of Art in America. Nevada 17 says, I've been reviewing some of the aspects in my natal chart. There is a lot to, I still learn about my natal chart. I'll tell you what's really interesting is after your kid has lived for a while, and then you look at their chart and you look at your chart and you go, holy shit. Oh yeah, I can see this. Because for a while you can't see it. But then after a while you start to see their chart, and you start to see their chart in relation to your chart. In fact, one of the charts I'm going to look at tonight is a mother-daughter chart. I don't think I've ever seen this before, but it is about as close to a twin soul chart coming through the mother-daughter relationship that I've ever seen. And I didn't think I would ever, first of all, I wouldn't call myself an expert in the appellation of a twin soul chart between two people. My friend LaFay Farrar down in South Carolina is actually really good at that. She wrote a book about it, and I think she's very accurate in her assessments when it comes to people and twin souls. So if you ever have any twin soul questions, I'd go hunt down LaFay. I've had her on my show a couple times. But I'm a pretty good student and a quick read, so I kind of figured out what to look for in some ways, and I can get pretty close. And we're gonna look at a chart tonight between a mother and a daughter, which I do think would resemble, like for instance, I'll show it to you later. If it were a couple, let's say man, who knows, man, woman. I'm not really invested in that, but let's just say man, woman. Okay. This would be, I'd look at it and go, wow, this is a really powerful chart for two people in a relationship. And if I didn't know this, if I didn't know your relationship, it seems beyond just like two people working on something. There's something very connected to each one of you at a soul level that I think is, we should talk about that. Like it'd be part of the dialogue. So when you get to that part of the dialogue, it's like, okay, well, twin flame, twin soul. Apparently there's differences between the soulmate and the twin flame. Soulmate is somebody you have a contract with and you work something out, right? The twin flame, apparently, and this is according to LaFay, is a person that you have, first of all, in order to have a twin flame in your life, and again, this is according to LaFay, you have to work through a lot of your relationship karma, or I would say you have to work through a lot of your relationship stuff so that you can have an unfettered connection with another human. But even then, it's not always easy. It's not apparently peaches and cream with the old twin flame thing. Anyway, we'll take a look at that tonight. Let's see. Who else do we have here? Oh, we got Bliss Lee. What's going on, Qigong? V is here. Who else do we have? Oh, the Crimmies are here. Miranda says, my brother and I started watching Falls in kindergarten. Everyone in my age group had to watch TGIF. Thomas Sheridan. Oh, that'd be interesting. I don't think Thomas and I would agree on a few key components. Other than that, I'm sure we'd have a pretty good conversation. He would not agree with me on 9/11 being important. And I'm not saying that he doesn't think it's important, but he's like, it's in the rearview mirror history. We got to move on. I'm not so sure about that, but that's just me. So we wouldn't agree on that. I know that for a fact. And there's another topic we probably wouldn't agree upon, which I don't want to get into. But on that, I'm sure we'd have a lot to talk about. And most of it, I think, more agreeable than not. Let's see. I already mentioned the Crimmies. They are here. Good show with them on Friday if you haven't seen it. Who else? Gucci to Goats, G to G, Brianna Eves. Hi, Brianna. There's Mike coming in on chat. Looks like Mike figured out the chat over on 15 minutes because he's back there again. April Himmel. Hi, April. I loved Full House. See, it's a generational thing. I think it's a generational thing. By the time Full House hit, I was out of the house. I was doing other things. It was not my must see TV. I'll tell you about how far back I go. My Full House was The Little Rascals on reruns after school. That's how far back I go. I am dating myself. I guess for me, my Full House would have been the Brady Bunch. Although, truth be told, I don't think we really watched much Brady Bunch as a kid when I was at home with my parents, because I think there was some other show on at that time. I think Brady Bunch was on Friday nights, and I think my parents just watched another show, and so we didn't really do the Brady Bunch at my house. But that, I think the Brady Bunch was the Full House of my generation. Now, we also had, and again, I'm dating myself, we had The Courtship of Eddie's Father, which was with Bill Bixby and Brandon, what's his name, who grew up to be a punk rocker. We had The Courtship of Eddie's Father. We had Family Affair, which was a weird show. I got into the Family Affair thing one night with about Buffy, like complete high strange with Buffy. I even looked at Buffy's chart. I think that was, and then there was weird stuff with even Mr. French, Sebastian Cabot? Strange show, really weird. Johnny Whitaker, who went on to his best work in Sigmund and the Sea Monsters. And let's see who else. What else was happening kid wise? Well, of course there was Leave It to Beaver. Leave It to Beaver was, I think, my original Full House. And we saw Leave It to Beaver as a kid on reruns after school. So that's how I saw every single episode. And I loved Eddie Haskell. I fucking loved Eddie Haskell. I thought Eddie Haskell was the most interesting person on Leave It to Beaver. Wally was too goody two shoes for me. He was just, I could never see myself as Wally. He had that all-American kind of look, wore the varsity jacket. I definitely wasn't Clarence. Was not Clarence. I wasn't Larry Mondello. I wasn't Whitey. Definitely wasn't Beaver. But that left Eddie Haskell. I'm like, this motherfucker is funny. And he's clever. So Eddie Haskell, in a lot of ways, was my first anti-hero on TV. So what did that tell you about where my head was at? Okay, who else do we have here? Oswald Spangler. Okay, in the house. There's Ren Star. Okay, she's got a new video up, working out her boots. Those boots are made for stomping. Let's see. You is 1970. So I grew up with a really good 80s family shows, like Family Ties. Gilligan's Island, is that, I grew up with Three's Company too, but I grew up with a different version. By the way, my aunt was good friends with Suzanne Summers in high school. Back then, she was Suzanne Mahoney. And they used to cut school and go out drinking. Imagine that. Andy Griffith. And Andy Griffith was great. Courtship of Eddie's Father, ? There's a question mark there. Mr. French was a good dude. Gumby, Art Clokey was from the Bay Area. So Gumby sprang out of the Bay Area. Lost in Space. Charles, I think that's a perfect show for you. Pun only slightly intended. Your Bills made the playoffs, so I think you're doing fine. Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Now, that is definitely a 90s show, for sure. Definitely 90s show. My best friend Bruce was Eddie. Oh, okay. My best friend. Yeah. Oh, your best friend Bruce was Eddie. Oh, okay. There you go. I get it. I get where you're coming from. Yes. I was Eddie too, unfortunately. I was banned from a number of households in my neighborhood. Was not allowed to come in the house or play with their kids at times. This is true. True story. You don't want to be with that boy. Ryan Seacrest died. I don't know. Did he? No, I don't think so. Donna Reed. Here we go. We are dropping the retro TV. We're in the shadow of Mercury retrograde, which probably doesn't exist, but um, Donna Reed, Bud. There apparently there's an episode of Donna Reed where all Bud does is mow the lawn. And the reason why is because the guy that played Bud was stoned. You got to remember that was what, late 1950s or early 1960s at the most. But he was so high on the set that all he did was push the mower for an entire show. Wally would look. Wally, you look back, and Wally was cool. Right? Wally was unflappable. Wally had incredibly high emotional IQ. It cannot be said enough for Wally's emotional IQ. If you were a parent, you would aspire for your kid to be Wally. He'd always make the most mature decisions, unlike Eddie. Let's see. The Odd Couple. The Odd Couple was funny. It was funny. It was a New York thing. To me, The Odd Couple was, if you want to break down in astrological terms, Virgo Pisces. That's your odd couple right there. Tony Randall, who is the Virgo, Mr. Neat, Mr. Anal Retentive, and Tony Randall did a great job. He might have even been better than Jack Lemmon, and Jack Lemmon was great as was it? There was Felix Unger and the other guy. He was the other guy. Felix Unger was the sports writer, played by God. Now I'm having a fucking senior moment here. I can see his. He played uh, the coroner, Jack Klugman. Jack Klugman, and then Walter Matthau played him in the movie. And the TV show was good. It was a good TV show, I have to say. Good characters, good, and just a total Virgo Pisces dynamic between those two guys. With Oscar Madison was the sports writer. Thank you. Oscar Madison was the sports writer. Felix Unger was the anal retentive Tony Randall. And so the sports writer I mean, he might have been a Sagittarius. I could see where Oscar could be a Sagittarius. But if you wanted to go polarity, Venus Pisces. Okay, Three's Company. We got into that. We're going to the Dobie Gillis. And Thomas, you're dating yourself a little bit there. I have been Spitfire since the Aries moon. Let's see. Dobie. I remember Dobie. Dobie Gillis had, of course, Maynard Krebs, played by Bob Denver, who would later become Gilligan for Gilligan's Island. It's my era too. The Partridge Family. Yeah, the Partridge Family. I think I saw maybe more episodes of the Partridge Family because it was on a different night than the Brady Bunch. I didn't see many episodes of the Brady Bunch. Maybe afterwards in reruns, but not while it was airing. Wally was a handsome dude. Laverne and Shirley, but we are retrograding here. Tony Randall. Yep, Tony Randall. Mary Tyler Moore Show. Oh yeah, Mary Tyler Moore. My father loved Mary Tyler Moore. I actually think my mother was jealous of Mary Tyler Moore. Walter Matthau played the most oddball. Walter Matthau did play the most oddball character. He was a trip. He was a total trip. He was in that movie with Andy Griffith. I think it's called A Voice in the Crowd. Have you guys ever seen A Voice in the Crowd? Holy fucking shit. That movie, let me just show you this movie here for a second. The Voice in the Crowd is an amazing movie. It was written by Robert Penn Warren, if I'm not mistaken. This is a movie that everybody should watch at least once. Let me see if I got it here. Let me see if I got the right movie. Hold on a second. Face in the Crowd. That's what it is. A Face in the Crowd. That's it. Not a Face in the Crowd with Andy Griffith. Walter Matthau's in it. Should I play the trailer? I'm going to play the trailer. Here we go. I'm going to play the trailer here. This is a really good fucking movie. Give me 1 second. Because we're touching on Andy Griffith and Walter Matthau. So we got to play this. I'll probably get a strike for it. Who cares? All right, here we go. Oh, you know what I need to do? I need to activate the sound. Okay, and 1, and a 2, and a 3.
Oh, lonesome roads.
Look out for him. He's mean. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Andy Griffith, another sensational newcomer from Elia Kazan, who brought you Marlon Brando and James Dean and Carol Baker.
Beat up. Free man in the morning. Free man in the morning. Free man in the morning.
Loved by millions, an idol of the people.
Bye. Bye, Lucy. So long, Luther. You write to me now. I'll be thinking of you, good people. Boy, I'm glad to shake that dump.
Look, don't try to play the noble defender of the sanctity of marriage with me, Papa Man. I know where you've been some of those nights when Betty was waiting up for you. You know, you hit me and it'll be all over the papers as much as the people love you tonight.
You're
they can
fired.
Hit you.
I'm not just an entertainer. I'm an influence, a wielder of opinion, a force. A force.
Oh, if they ever heard the way that psycho really talks.
They're mine. I own them. They think like I do. But they're even more stupid than I am. So I gotta think for them.
One of the greatest characterizations ever put on the screen in the whole history of motion pictures.
Maybe I'm just a country boy. But if the president tries to stop me, I'll flood the White House with millions of telegrams.
All right, so I got that confused with All the King's Men, which give me 1 second here. Now I'm on this thing. So I got that confused with All the King's Men with Broderick Crawford, which was written by Robert Penn Warren, if I'm not mistaken. But it's a very similar theme. What you have is you have two men who kind of rise out of nowhere and become the vox populi, the voice of the people. And Andy Griffith I don't think he ever played another role like that again. I mean, there are moments in that movie where he is just absolutely menacing. Like, he is menacing and dangerous. And he's able to convey a wild charisma. I'm like, I saw that movie for the first time, I don't know, maybe about 7 years ago. And I was just blown away. It was on TCM. So it's a very interesting film as a study into kind of mass psychology, the cult of personality, power, and not just the power or the accumulation of power of Andy Griffith, but also Tony Franciosa. You saw him in there. He's the guy with the white tie and the white blazer. His rise to power as Andy Griffith's manager, and then ultimately overtaking the property of Andy Griffith's character. So it's a really, really powerful movie. There are a number of movies like that from the 50s that are these really interesting cautionary tales about the abuse of power, and through the media as well. The media plays a role in the abuse of power. It's kind of a foreshadowing of what will occur. There's another movie with Burt Lancaster. Is it The Night of the Iguana? And he plays a publicist who's just a piece of shit. Anyway, that movie's worth seeing. That was just a riff on me, the Andy Griffith Show. All right, why don't we get going and start talking about some astrology? I've just been kind of messing around here, although we have talked a little bit of astrology, odd couple astrology, right? But it's interesting if you go back and look at some of those TV shows, and especially when Pluto goes into Libra. When Pluto goes into Libra, the idea of the family really gets chopped up and changed. So when that happens, we're in the 70s. You know, we're around 71, 72, right around there. And of course, that's when we see shows like The Brady Bunch, or we see shows like The Partridge Family. So they're not typical versions of the family. They're not nuclear families. Well, one is kind of a nuclear family squared, which would be the Brady Bunch, and then the Partridge Family is a family without a father. I mean, there's no father in the Partridge Family, but there is Reuben Kincaid. So we begin to see different versions of the family, and even somebody like Mary Tyler Moore, who does not have a family, and that's the whole thing, right? There is no family. She has no kids. She's a woman without children, so she can become this news producer in this wonderful city of Minneapolis, and her family is the extended family of the news team, and which is a very kind of Aquarian thing. So she's even part of it, because in I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was 1967, 1968. We saw what was called the Great Purge in television. And that was orchestrated by Brandon Tartikoff, which I've talked about before on other shows. And there were a number of shows that were doing very well in terms of ratings. It's not that the shows were unsuccessful. They were quite successful, actually, and did really well with sponsors. And those shows were shows like the Beverly Hillbillies, Green Acres, The Wild Wild West, Bonanza. So these were shows that were representing kind of different Petticoat Junction's another one, different family motifs, and shows that had different quote unquote American values, right? So right around 67, 68, they had the Great Purge, and Brandon Tartikoff comes in and starts wiping out all of these beloved old shows. And they were not failing shows. They were actually successful shows. And in comes this new wave of programming, which is, well, diverse. And you had shows like Bridget Loves Bernie. And it's a show about how it's a marriage between Meredith Baxter and David Burney. So, and David Burney was Jewish. He's Jewish. So he's Jewish on the show. And he's David and she's Bridget. So it's the first show where you have a Jewish, non-Jewish interfaith marriage, right? That happens right there, right around that time. And you have Laugh-In, and it's paving the way for the Norman Lear revolution in television, where again, you get a family thing, but it's not really family as we knew it. It was Good Times, or it was Sanford and Son, which is a family show. I mean, it's a father and a son show, albeit a bit different, but it's a father and a son show. It's a family show. Um, let's see, what else was a family show back then? Even Maude was a family show, but again, different. You had super feminist mother and super feminist wife and or daughter, and then her friends and her husband. Again, it was family. The Jeffersons. It was a family show, but it was different. And this was because they were just going to do a culture change on TV. And some of those shows were great, and some of them had, really good characters and great episodes. And yet at the same time, you can see where the word or the term programming comes from, because people might have been just fine with another decade of Beverly Hillbillies or Green Acres or Wild Wild West or whatever those shows were. But it was like, no, we're not going to do that. That's not going to happen anymore. And I feel like a lot of that goes hand in hand. The Jupiter Uranus sextile in Virgo really started to hit around late in 1962, right? In late 1961, Pluto and Uranus and Virgo start to conjunct, and that conjunction will basically take place throughout the 60s. And that's a huge cultural transit. It's powerful, enormous, right? It's big stuff. That's why the 60s were such intense times in a lot of ways, because it was that Pluto Uranus conjunction in Virgo, and then you had Neptune kind of on the wing there in Scorpio, which was flowing into both those outer planets. And so when you have something like that, you're dealing with kind of the nature and the kind of the subatomic matrix of culture. And it's not just the United States. I mean, it was happening pretty much all over the world, obviously, but the United States was in this really intense boom period. So Pluto represents cultural change at a deep level. And that was a time where we were moving kind of more towards this Virgo energy. And it was, one of the phrases was, power to the people, right? And that was a very 60s oriented term. And I've always contended that Virgo following Leo is about the people. And Leo represents a ruling class. It represents royalty. It represents dominion. It represents a lot of different things, but from a cultural standpoint, that's where Leo is. So there was this big shift going on during that time, and it also is commensurate with the second turning in the United States. So the second turning being pretty much the summer of love, or the summer of America after the first turning, which is the spring of America coming out of World War II. And we've gone through a period of these turnings, right? But this is the latest one. So when you have that, when you see Pluto, when you see Uranus come together, you're going to see things like the Great Purge in television, because it's kind of on the table. And those kinds of revolutionary currents were, already flowing through our reality since 1962. We had that major stellium in Aquarius in 1962. And then on the heels of that in 1963, of course, the death of JFK, which, basically creates a rent in our reality, flips the timeline, and we're headed down a different path. And the guy that initiates all these changes that are going to take place in the 60s is a Virgo. It's Lyndon Johnson. So he is right in time and in alignment with the Pluto-Uranus conjunction. And I'm no fan of Lyndon Johnson. His city is right down the road from where I live. I think he's one of the worst fucking presidents in modern history. And there are a lot of bad ones. Most of them are bad. He's terrible. But he's the guy that ushers in that time right? And we get the war on poverty. We get the Great Society. These are all very Virgoan kinds of social attributes. We're going to wipe out poverty. We're going to have all these services, right? Because that's what Virgo does. Virgo serves. So we're going to have all these social services. And Johnson is going to be the gatekeeper. He's going to be the initiator for that period and cycle in time. And of course, we have Pluto and Uranus, which is right there at the same time. And it's radicalizing the idea of service and what people get from services. So what's the outgrowth of that? Well, we have massive government that begins to accumulate a huge amount of debt because of what took place during the Great Society and the social contract, which is now like crazy, right? We've got welfare, we've got all kinds of entitlements. Eventually, affirmative action comes into play. We've gone down this rabbit hole before on this show. We looked at the creation of PBS, all kinds of, marketing, radio communication, and propaganda. That's all coming out of Johnson. And it all reflects this kind of Virgoan world that is really, in a lot of ways, driven by the back end, which is Pisces. And Johnson didn't do it because he was idealistic. Trust me. The guy was he didn't lack for money. Let's put it that way. But what he loved was power. Are you coming up here? There we go. But it wasn't out of some overwhelming need to right the wrongs of society. I don't think that, but him being a Virgo certainly made it easier. You have a Leo president in there. I'm not sure it's going to happen that way. And if it may happen, but not that way. So by the time we get to the end of the 60s, this Pluto-Uranus conjunction has really kicked in. And, the idea of, power to the people has metastasized, and the counterculture has become weaponized. And that continued to live on for a bit, right? It kind of got subdued a bit in the 70s. The 70s were kind of like the 50s in a lot of ways. There were definitely some 1950s elements to the 1970s. In fact, that's when American Graffiti became extremely popular. That's when the show Happy Days became popular. So there's this echo effect from the 70s to the 50s. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that the guys that grew up in the 50s are now in a position of power to make television shows and movies about the 50s, like George Lucas and Gary Marshall. But that Pluto-Uranus conjunction, and especially with Neptune and Scorpio coming in on the wing and fueling that cultural transformation, that was a big astrological period of time for the United States and the world. And of course, there's the dark side and the downside of that takes place at the end of the 60s. Anyway, there you go. A little bit of history, TV history. Okay, so culture history. So why don't we get into the bulk of the show? I'm already an hour in, so I need to think about time here. And Rosie, you want to say a prayer tonight, Rosie? I want to say a prayer to all the cats out there who don't have a home, who are cold, looking around for scraps, the warmth of human kindness. Shall we hold a place in our hearts for the how about those people, the people that are like that right now? Who was I looking at today? It was Tucker Carlson, and he had some footage of the homeless encampments. And let me tell you, I really believe that this country in the world, but really in a lot of ways, this country has some real problems. The least of which is what's floating around and masquerading as a national emergency. Although, don't get me wrong, there are things that you need to be very, very careful of. And watchful of now. You have to really be taking extremely good care of yourself. And you also have to be very selective. And it gives me no pleasure to say this, but you have to be very selective about where you spend your time and with whom. So I'm not here to be part of the self-segregating two-tier society and an advocate for that, which I'm not. But I am here to tell you that it is not, we're not, this is not a business as usual climate right now in terms of health and in terms of who we are and who we're with. And I'm just going to leave it there. And I'm not saying not to hang out with people, but you better, and I mean, you better be wise, and you better take care of yourself. I guess there's this woman named Kirsten W., who is a kind of a Q person, and I guess she died a couple days ago, and apparently she wasn't feeling well, and she wasn't listening to people about what to do to how to take care of her body, and she put herself into a place where she was in a vulnerable environment and wound up in a place where nobody could help her. And apparently now she gone. Right. So I would say that's a case of hubris, as well as whatever it is that shut her down, plus whoever shut her down. You just got to be, I don't use the word careful. It's got to be conscious. You have to be conscious now. It's very important. Very important. But that's a huge issue, but there's bigger issues, much bigger issues. And the issues are systemic. I mean, we're dealing with a country in a world, but a country that is hooked on drugs. The drug epidemic in this country is to the moon. I mean, from fentanyl and whatever oxy is still floating around, to meth, to prescription meds. We were watching a show last night, and it was Michael, I think it was Michael K. Williams, the guy who was on The Wire, who just died. And apparently he died with an overdose of a cocktail of a lot of the drugs that I was just talking about. And so he had this show on Vice. Apparently there's a whole new season starting tomorrow. Like there's a season in the can. And what he was doing is he was going into like very intense, really urban environments to see what the Black community was doing in order to get by, survive, hustle. So going into places that most people would not go into. And one of the episodes has him going down into Houston and hanging out with these guys in Houston. And what they do in Houston is they get together and they have their cars, and they're all kind of tricked out, and they barbecue and they sit around and they drink this stuff called lean. And I'm sure a number of you know what it is. It is a codeine-based cough syrup. And then what they do is they add it to soda. And not just any soda. They're looking for, I guess, the elixir of choice is Faygo pineapple and mango. I think that's the elixir of choice. And then they add Jolly Rancher candy to it. So they get this shit like really sweet. And they put it on ice and they have their styrofoam cups, and they just drink this lean, while they're doing, and apparently it's some kind of a status symbol because the lean is quite expensive. You can find it. But it's a whole, it represents an underbelly of addiction in this country. Now, what's interesting about the lean people is that, they don't get all hyped up and crazy and start, it's an opioid. Codeine is an opioid. So they're basically drinking codeine soda is what it is. And one of the guys who Michael K. Williams hung out with was a DJ, and I think he dropped a track with him. He did some vocal stuff, and between the time he did that and the editing of that episode and the airing of the episode, that DJ died. Now, who knows what he died of, but this guy was a lean freak. And then he goes out to California and he starts exploring the lean subculture there, where they're playing chemist and they're doing all this other stuff. Now, apparently you can't get the cough syrup as much anymore. They've kind of caught on to it, right? But guess who's bringing the cough syrup into the United States? Cartels. They'll create anything. Apparently avocados too now. Anyway, so we've got a huge drug problem here, and nobody ever talks about it. It's never addressed, and it's tied into homelessness. It's tied into hopelessness. It's tied into despair. It's tied into demoralization and desolation. I mean, we have a real spiritual crisis in this country. It's terrible. Really terrible. And we wonder why things are happening the way they're happening. And we wonder why people allow these things to happen. If you step back and take a look at it, the majority of the people are on fucking drugs. That's why. They're on drugs. And they're either meds that are given to them in order to cope, to deal with the stress, to deal with the anxiety. Like, how does that factor into people thinking clearly and wrapping their heads around this so-called reality and seeing what's happening? I'm guessing that it impedes into the process, or it impedes into one's ability to process the information. So I'm going to give you a little confession here. Back in 2008, it was 2008, 2000, it was 2009. 2009, man, that was a year. That was a year. So this was in March of 2009, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it was not a good time. So I actually was placed under a 3-day hold in March of 2009. So I've talked about it before. It's nothing that I'm like ashamed of. It was actually one of the most powerful experiences of my life. And one of the things that happened during that 72 hours was that I was given some medicine to take. And for the first couple of times they gave it to me, I didn't take it. I faked them out. But then I said to myself, you know what? I'm going to take it because I want to see what this is like. I want to see what it's like to live like this in a controlled environment for a brief period of time. So I did. And I did it for probably about 48 hours. And let me tell you, it was not great. It was not great. And the reason it wasn't great was because for most of that period, I didn't even want to get up off the couch. And it wasn't because I was sleepy or lethargic. I was a little lethargic. I just didn't have any motivation. I guess I was lethargic. But I did it because I wanted to see what my brain was like and how it could process this state. And it couldn't process it very well. And it was the only time I'd ever done anything like that. And apparently whatever it was they gave me, I think it was banned not long after that. And there were a bunch of course, lawsuits, civil cases, right? Class action suits. So just on that 48-hour experience alone, I could only imagine what it would be like to live like that full time, or to live in a reality or a version of reality like that full time. And that's just whatever it is they're giving you to help you. Not good. And then you've got all the other stuff that comes through, which is, I mean, you've got Big Pharma, who's a pusher. I mean, they're the biggest fucking drug dealers on the planet. Let's face it. And then you have the street chemists who are doing their best to create these analogs of these drugs, like, for instance, this codeine cough spirit. And of course, you've got fentanyl, and you've got a huge population of people that are either incapacitated or dying because of these drugs. Now, the drugs are a symptom. They're not the cause. The cause is whatever is eating away at people and eating away at their spirits, which is an absolute crime. So I guess what I wanted to do is just say, say a bit of a prayer for all of our brothers and sisters out there who are really suffering. And we're all suffering to some degree or another. But the ones who are really suffering, who can't distinguish who they are from reality at this point in time. I just want to, I don't know what the answer is for these people. But they're part of us, right? They're a part of us. They're a part of us that's gone bad. They're a part of, when I say bad, I'm not talking about they've become bad, but just bad, like a piece of fruit or a piece of meat that's gone bad. And, I'm not sure what we're going to do about them, but it's an issue. It's a very big issue. And it contributes to the social condition in a way that ultimately it's not positive. Because when we have a lot of these people down like this, and I mean down, and a lot of these guys down in Houston, they were functional. Like they had jobs, some had jobs, and I don't know, some of them probably had jobs that aren't jobs, if you know what I'm saying. But when we have a segment of our society that's not functional like that, we're in real trouble. And I understand why they probably wouldn't want to be functional on some level, right? Because a lot of us could look around and say, well, this is a sick fucking world we're living in. And this is a hard place we're living in. And I think it would be easy to make those kinds of assessments. At the end of the day, this is the hardest part, that we have to rise above this. So if you have the capacity in your life right now, if you're not one of those people, first of all, thank your lucky stars and count your blessings, and use what you have right now, what God has given you, so that you can improve the quality of your life. And we all have issues, we all have problems, whatever they are. But use your energy and your ability in a lot of ways to be untouched by this, to make your life better. And we look around and say, well, how can we make our lives fucking better? You can. And as long as you can have a scintilla of positivity without being Pollyanna, you can get through this and you can make your life better. It doesn't take much. And we have no other choice at this point. No other choice. I guess you do have a choice. Like I said before, you can bottom out if you want. And I've said it before, bottoming out is a strategy. You can bottom out. That's where you want to go. Just go for it. Bottom out. Maybe you'll get to the other side. You'll have an Eckhart Tolle moment. But if you don't want to bottom out, frankly, I've bottomed out more than a few times in my life. You spend 72 hours in a place like I did in 2009. It's a little bit of a bottom out, right? So I'm not really that interested in, but if I had to bottom out again, well, that's the way it is. But I'm not interested in bottoming out anymore. And that's just me. So if you're not interested in bottoming out, then keep going up and to the right as much as you can. And let's not forget those people who have bottomed out, because they are part of our lives. And even the bottoming out that would be so egregious and in your face, which would be like a tent city. That's just a portion of it. I mean, there are people that bottomed out and they're functional, but they're propped up by any number of things that allow them to keep going. But they've bottomed out. And who knows where they go after this. All right, that's my prayer. It wasn't really much of a prayer, but it was something. Okay. Let's get into the chart of the moment. And we've got a bunch of charts to go over and jump into. So let's check this out. I think that was inspired by the Gil Scott-Heron stuff, man. Because Gil Scott-Heron, man, he took a hard turn. He took a hard turn down. The guy was such a freaking talent. Such a talent. What do we got here? Okay, we got a moon in Aries. So it's my chart reference. Let me just change this. I always have the wrong chart reference. I should always do this before the show starts. By the way, my progressed sun just changed signs. Not today. Probably about 2 months ago. So my progressed sun is now at 0 Sag. I've been feeling a bit more philosophical lately. All right, here we go. I've got Gil Scott-Heron, the bottle in my head now. All right, let's look at the chart of the moment. It's better than other songs I've had in my head recently. I don't want to go there. Okay, here we go. All right. Virgo rising. Hey, I've been talking about Virgo. How about that? Here we go. We're down here now. So in 7 days, we have a Sun-Pluto conjunction. That'll be fun. What is that going to be? We're going to be at the 16th of January. Boy, we're creeping up on that Pluto return, aren't we? Venus is just retrograded past the sun. It's going to be, it's going to be retrograde for a while. I think it goes direct in, what is it? Let's see. So 2/22, it's at 11 Capricorn. I think it was direct at 11 Capricorn. So just before the 2/22. So right around the end of January, beginning of February, we have Venus direct, but it's got to go all the way back to 11 Capricorn. We got Mars at 19 Sag, and today we had a Mars moon trine still in there. So tomorrow we should be right around, what about 20, 29 Aries, or tomorrow when you wake up. Definitely moving into Taurus at the beginning of the week, later in the day. So we'll have a pretty grounded moon here. And we're coming into a full moon by the end of the week. And that'll be in Cancer. And that should be really close to, let's see, so Friday, right? So we have 2 days in Taurus and 2 days in Gemini. So that's 4 days. So right around Friday, and that'll be around 20. So we'll have the Sun-Pluto conjunction, and we'll have a full moon. That'll be this weekend should be very interesting. I'm trying to wrap my head around a little bit, because Cancer's very Cancer is really conventional, and Cancer is sentimental, and Cancer represents, feeling as it relates to the family, as it relates to your home, as it relates to things that are near and dear to you. Those are all very Cancerian kinds of aspects or expressions. And then we have this Sun Pluto conjunction, which to me is like a fucking Death Star, especially opposite the full moon, in Cancer. It's almost like we're gunning for it. Like they're gunning for it. They're gonna gun down this full moon. It reminds me of that episode of The Tick, where you had a villain that like carved half of his name in the moon and stayed there, right? Like they're gunning for this thing. It feels like we're kind of in that phase. We started the discussion on Friday. I think it was Friday with the Supreme Court and the whole vaccine thing. I guess the Ohio case went before the Supreme Court, which you listen to Breyer and you listen to Sotomayor, and it's like the fix is fucking in. Sotomayor is, comparing people to machines. Do you think that that's by accident? I don't think so. She's comparing people to machines because guess what? There's a pretty good chance that that's how they're going to view you, because there's already been a ruling that if your body is modified, you're no longer human. Yep. So that's one of the reasons why Sotomayor is talking about humans being machines. She was clearly misinformed about when she was referring to the number of babies or children that were in the hospital. She was misinformed about that. And I think that came out. If it hasn't come out, it will. But it does. This is courts in general are not great. And this one is a very malleable and highly corruptible version. You have basically two people on there who you might be able to count on, in Thomas and Alito, to have any kind of what we'd call, I guess, conservative dissent. And then you have the imposters, who are Amy Coney Barrett, who I predicted on this show would be a turncoat and would also be a key person in selling Donald Trump out with his presidency. And I was right. You have Gorsuch, who's strange. I mean, sometimes Gorsuch can kind of chime in on the conservative side, and sometimes he's deeply liberal. And then you have Kavanaugh, who is a deep state baby and probably a cross-dresser. So you can't trust any of those people. If you really want to have a fair and balanced court rendering. And then you have Sotomayor, and then Kagan, who never tried a court case in her life ever, either as an attorney or a judge. So she's in there. Breyer, who is essentially taking up Ruth Bader Ginsburg's role. And you have Roberts, who is completely and utterly compromised, came in as an appointee of Bush, supposed to be a Republican or conservative, far from it. Has never been in that camp, and a lot of people think it's because he's been compromised. So I just don't, I'm not getting a good feeling about this whole process with how this thing is going to be ruled on, especially with this Sun-Pluto conjunction, and as it just bears right down onto that full moon in Cancer, where people have organic values and people have analog ties to their emotional body, right? So I think that's problematic. And the people stand out here, right? I think of Cancer as being a very traditional sign. It's a conservative sign. So Cancer standing out, right? These values are standing out. Now, the good news is that, as the moon moves into that progression here, it will wind up trining Neptune, which can be quite good in terms of a deeper, more mystical, more intuitive connection. So it's almost kind of like we have two separate realities going on here. We have one reality that's determined by this Death Star like conjunction with Sun Pluto, kind of bearing down on these. I would use the word conservative, not in a political sense, but conservative. When you think of Cancer, people that are Cancerian, they are into conservation. They save shit. They save money. They save things around the house. So when I refer to Cancer and conservative, I mean, I'm talking, not just about a political belief system or value system. So there's this, right? There's kind of the harsh intensity bearing down on that on that interpretation, or on that representation of Cancer. But then you've got this out here with the wing. It starts with the moon going into Cancer and then trining Jupiter very quickly. And this will be, if I'm not mistaken, this will be the first trine to Jupiter this year with the moon. So it's kind of special, right? We're getting the first trine to Jupiter, and and it's a full moon. So of course, Jupiter is going to expand a lot of feeling. And then during this phase and cycle, the moon will wind up trining Neptune. This is an interesting, like 24-hour period. So what are we doing? Friday and Saturday, and then the moon is also during that time going to be into a sextile with Uranus. That's going to be an interesting lunar phase because there's so much potential here. You've got the sextile with Uranus, you have the trine with Neptune, the trine with Jupiter, and then you have sort of the intensity of the Death Star right there, beaming down, bearing down across it. It feels to me like it's, this is a period where figures become more sympathetic. And the moon is also related to the mother here. And I'm just wondering how long, we've seen the mama bears come off the bench at these school board meetings, but I'm just wondering how long these mama bears are going to be on the bench when it comes to their kids and the carjack, right? How long are they going to be able to be silent and not allow this to happen? I think it's soon, and you could be seeing it, the start of it, by the end of the week. Because to me, this is the maternal energy here with the moon, and the sextile to Uranus it's radical, it's activated. The trine to Neptune is something that is universal, right? It binds people. It's a condition that everybody shares, because that's how Neptune works. It's kind of this, bandwidth and this broadcast that we all connect with on an emotional level. And then the trine with Jupiter, to me, is getting expansive about this potential for feeling and even action, right? So I think the big action this week comes at the end of the week. And when we get to, Thursday, Friday, that's when always the big news stories drop, especially on Friday. But that's also around the same time that I think the moon is really going to start to kick in here and, do some magic. I think, and again, this is the first trine to Jupiter of the new year. So the energy is fresh, right? It's fresh. It's opening. And, what would happen if people were able to really channel that kind of emotion, which is about values, which is about caring, about nurturing and safety. Like Cancer's a defensive sign. Cancer it's a cardinal sign, just like the other three other cardinal signs, but it defends the home. It defends families. It defends their loved ones and their children, right? mean, the crab is a defensive animal. It is not an offensive animal. It's a defensive animal. It only moves backwards, sideways. It's at its best when it's really in its like, in its little crab cubbyhole. It's got that big ass claw out there that can, really do some damage. It's when it's at its best, right? So to me, what happens if a number of people feel the same thing simultaneously and then they act on it, right? They act on their emotions in a spontaneous kind of way. So that's where I think the big aspects are this week. We already have Saturn squaring Uranus, and it's been there for a while. Mercury is coming in here, so 4 days from now. So where are we? We're on Thursday again. Mercury Saturn conjunction rather, into square with Uranus. And again, you go with Mercury Saturn, you're dealing with things like pronouncements, people making law. That's what happens with Saturn. Sagittarius creates the law. Saturn enforces the law. Remember that. Sagittarius creates the law. Saturn enforces the law. Saturn rules judges. Judges adjudicate. They're the ones that attach penalty. They're the ones that interpret. And so people can draw up the laws vis-a-vis Sagittarius, but until they're acted upon, ruled upon, and adjudicated, they're just abstracts. So we're going to have a Mercury Saturn conjunction squaring Uranus. I mean, it could go, I wouldn't say it could go either way. Of course, it could go either way. My sense is that the court will rule in favor of the extra special conditions that are associated with the emergency of the time that we're in. And I listened to part of what Clarence Thomas was having to deal with, and what the court is, what the Biden administration, this is the Biden administration, what they're trying to make a case for here, as it relates to the state of Ohio, is the fact that everybody has gone through this process of having to be carjacked. So what they're doing is they're stating that there's a precedent for this. And there have been precedents over periods of time where there's been an immediacy of this needing to take place. Of course, polio being one of them. So they're kind of looping into the precedent and then the immediacy factor. But what they aren't really addressing is the nature of the thing that is being distributed and applied during the carjack. That's not being addressed. So the administration, and I believe the state of Ohio, are essentially branding this as just another carjack. And so really, what's the big deal under special circumstances and considerations? This is the basis and the foundation of the argument, right? So there will be a lot of emotion towards the end of the week, but I don't think it'll be bad. I think it could be actually quite good. It could get people to act. It could get people to experience something simultaneously in a way that could unify them. And the other a lot of times I don't place a lot of emphasis on lunar transits because they're so well transitory. But this one is interesting, particularly because we're dealing with the Sun-Pluto opposition. We're dealing with the first trine with Jupiter, and then it's also going to be in sextile with Uranus and then trine with Neptune. Now, astrology is agnostic, so those elements could be used also in other ways. But because of the opposition, I mean, I feel like the opposition is really the key to decode this. It's about the so let's say if it was a new moon, right? If it was a new moon, we'd have the moon here, we'd have Sun here, Pluto here, and that's all kind of it's congealing and becoming part of this concentrated focus of power and transmission. And then you would still have the sextile to Jupiter, the sextile to Neptune. Then you'd have the trine to Uranus. And to me, this would be a complete and utter moment for the establishment, right? Dealing with the oligarchs, dealing with the rulers of Capricorn, Saturn, right? But it's not. We're dealing with oppositional energy here. So my sense is that we're going to get big news Thursday, Friday, and it will have to do with the carjack. And who knows? Maybe the messengers will break the news earlier. Maybe we'll get it tomorrow, Tuesday, Wednesday. Who knows? But I really feel like the concentration, the consecration of the energy is Thursday, Friday, and then going into the weekend. But I don't think it's bad. I think it's galvanizing in a way, and it's also one of those full moons that I think is really ripe for dreaming too. I mean, that's the other thing, and I think people still need dreams. I mean, that's the most defining thing you can do right now is to have a dream. Because they don't, the powers that be, we don't really need to run down the list, right? Let's just call them our spiritual doppelgangers, because they're here to force us to grow in a way that we have not heretofore collectively grown before. So we can thank them for that, and we'll thank them later. Maybe we thank them a little bit now, but we'll really thank them later. Right. So, but what they don't want you to do, these dark archonic forces, is to have a dream. Because a dream means that you're an individual, and they don't want the individual to exist. If the individual exists, it's going to be their dream or their nightmare. So the most defiant thing you can do is have a dream. And I would say, dare to dream, especially with this moon Neptune trine. What do you want? What do you want to do? What's your most outrageous dream? What's your most outrageous and yet, if you stretch enough, you might be able to get their dream. By the time we get to this full moon, now a lot of times with the new moon, that's where you want to kind of program that stuff in. But with this trine with Neptune coming up, you definitely want to tap into that. And a lot of it could do with things like land and sanctity and safety and security and family. What's your dream for your family? Whatever family you have. Maybe it's very little. Maybe it's a lot. Maybe you want to find a family. So there you go. Chart of the moment, the week ahead. All right, let's get into a few more charts. So Masaki had talked about Vitalik Buterin, the guy who is the creator of Ethereum. And so I've been wanting to look at his chart for the last few weeks. And do I want to do that right now? Let me do January 6th. I wanted to look at January 6th chart. I did a little bit of it on Giuseppe and Dave's show. But it had been a while since I revisited this chart. And for me, January 6th starts at 11 a.m., which is when Donald John Trump begins his speech. And it's in Washington, D.C., so there we go. And what I found really interesting about this chart is what was going on with the ascendant. And it's at 29 Pisces. And I just looked at it. I'm like, this is fucking nuts. It's the last degree of the zodiac. There's nothing left. There's just absolutely nothing left. It's anaretic at 29. When we talk about Pisces, we talk about scapegoats, and we talk about people that take on the sins of others with Pisces. Big scapegoat moment emerges out of January 6th. Certain group of people. You also have a lot of deception with Pisces. You have people who claim to be certain people, but aren't those people at all. Am I right? You were talking about Ray Epps, double agents, True Node down there in Gemini, in Gemini's house. So you have double agents galore with the True Node in Gemini in the third house. And that's what you had. You had agent provocateurs. And the thing with January 6th, with the 29th degree of Pisces there, nothing is as it seems. Nothing. And that includes Ashley Babbitt, by the way. You cannot take anything with January 6th at face value, not with the 29th degree of Pisces there. Then you look down and we see all, this Aries, right? And this is an intercepted house. We have Chiron, we have Eris, and then we have Mars. Now remember, this is the culmination of the denouement of Mars. And Mars had been in Aries for most of 2020 and was the energy of the color revolution, the purple revolution. It was Mars and Aries. They were using that fucking Mars energy to burn the place down. So it's right there at the 29th degree. It's like that is the culmination, right? That's it. There's no energy left. And even the expression of Mars is really, well, it's flaccid there. You watch them, you look at some of those pictures of people inside the rotunda, and they're walking between the velvet ropes. There are cameras, video, still. They're all lined up, just like they're waiting for them to walk through and right into the rotunda, led by their fearless leader, Buffalo Bob Shaman. That's Mars 29. There's nothing there, right? There's no violence there. They're sitting around and they're shooting the shit and trying to be respectful. Meanwhile, outside there are skirmishes. There's your True Node in Gemini. You have these two realities going on. You have the reality that's going on inside, which more than likely is a staged photo op, and some people that foolishly walked in to that, walked into the trap. And then you have the skirmishes on the outside. And again, to me, that's a lot of that is staged as well. You've got a lot of bad actors. You've got people that are dressed up as so-called patriots. You have patriots that are actually working for the man, right? You have people who are supposed to be the man, but most likely they're rent-a-cops for a crisis actor moment. That's all going on there. And this is the fairy tale that they're trying to sell people. And you have this intercepted house, which you're trying to get to the bottom what all this kind of, this Mars energy is about. And you have Chiron and Aries. It's ridiculous. Chiron and Aries, again, to me, it represents this wounding of the individual. I mean, collectively, this is what they want to ascribe to the individual. When we talk about Aries, we talk about things like Mars, Aries, Aryan, all the nasty Nazis that are running around this country. By the way, I've lived in this country now for 60 years, 61. I'm 61. I've never met a Nazi. I've never met a Nazi. I've never met a Klan member. I have met people that have said a salty word or two against people from another race or another religion, right? I've met those people. Not many, though. Not many. You would think that in all the circles that I've run, that I've never run into, and they exist, don't get me wrong. It's not like they don't exist, but they don't exist in the way that they're being portrayed. And that's Chiron. To me, that's Chiron and Aries right there in the first house. Mars has no energy left. It's getting ready to move into Taurus. And I remember when Mars moved into Taurus, man, it was just so slow. Like I just remember January just dragging on, and February dragging on. Then finally, by the time we got out of February, it started to pick up a little bit. But last January was one of the longest months I've ever experienced. for a number of different reasons. But there's no energy left here. None, zero, nada. There's nothing, nothing. And speaking of law, we have Venus here, 27 Sag, and everything is anoretic. The midheaven is anoretic. The IC is anoretic. The DC is anoretic at 29 Virgo. But to me, the midheaven at anoretic Sagittarius with Venus there conjunction. So we're gonna talk about laws and what's right and what's fair and all the righteous indignation of what took place on January 7th or 6th rather, no 7th, right? January 6th. And then we have the square to Neptune going on there. It's a wide square, but it's a square. Neptune's at 18, so that's 9 degrees. Venus Neptune square. Neptune's in the 12th house, which is a good placement for Neptune. But the square to Venus is that there are shady relationships there. That's how it works. People aren't who they portray themselves to be. Bottom line, end of story. I think the biggest, to me, the biggest piece around that day is this 29 degrees Pisces. I wonder, and I talked about this a little bit on Giuseppe and Dave's show. What would have happened if Trump had waited half an hour and the ascendant would have been in Aries? I wonder what would have really happened. Would they have had a real insurrection at that point? I don't know. I mean, the energy of the chart would have definitely changed. It would not have been the same. But there's just nothing left. It's sort of the end of something. And one could make a case that on that day, the Republic did die, but not in the way that it's being portrayed by the media. And that would be the kind of the tail end of everything that started with Mars in Aries during the summer of Floyd, which was the insurrection. That was the insurrection, the burning of the streets of America, the removing of the statuary, the decapitation of the statuary. That was the insurrection. So by here, there's just nothing left. It's just show. And because it's intercepted, we don't understand it. That's the other thing, right? We don't see what was really going on in that moment because we're dealing with this intercepted house. The second house starts in Taurus, which is grounded, rooted. And then the first house starts at that 29th degree of Pisces. So there's a big missing chunk between perception, which would be Pisces, and reality, which would be Taurus in the second house. Big chunk. And this is the part that is getting worked out right here. Moon is in Libra at 20, and it's in opposition with Mars. This big T-square going on. This T-square is what's firing that event. Still, to this day, it's like the smoldering coals of this event is the burning T-square with this Moon-Mars opposition. Because Moon in Libra is about balance and fairness, but it's being really stressed and contorted and challenged here. Sun, Pluto, Mercury, all in Capricorn. So you've got these, again, this fucking Capricorn. Pardon me, I like Capricorn, all right? I'm just talking about the sign and what it represents at a high level. You've got all this fucking Capricorn here squaring the Moon in Libra, which is trying to be just and fair. Also in the Moon, you're dealing with some degree of public feeling because the Moon represents sort of the collective feeling. And then we have this opposition going on with Mars. So it feels to me like it's just being played. Like the forces of the Saturnian plutocrats are playing the situation for all they can get from it. And at the end of the day, this 29 degree ascendant in Pisces is really flimsy. It's very, very flimsy. I wonder how and when this will be resolved. when we have Saturn going through Pisces, that's going to be an interesting transit. It's not going to be for a while. We're talking almost 5 years. I mean, Saturn's going to go all the way through Pisces. I wonder how Jupiter is going to affect a transit here. It does go to 29 degrees. And it goes to 20. Let me find out when. Pretty early. I think it's April. Let me just look at it real quick. Okay, so we have 27 goes to 27 by the end of April. And then Jupiter hits 29 in May. So we're talking May 6th to May 10th. So May 6th to May 10th, that will be an interesting time. Will it result in justice or more illusion? I guess we'll find out at some point around that time. So there it is. There's your chart for what happened on January 6th. And again, I feel like the astrological forensics and the fingerprints for the singer right here, trying to find scapegoats, trying to pin the motive of the moment onto, and let's face it, when we talk about Pisces, we also talk about religion. So we could probably look at Christianity being in the crosshairs here. Also, people that followed Trump religiously, or perhaps Q as a type of modern religion, all kind of, coalescing at that 29th degree of Pisces. And there is an element of religious persecution here. So I think it's an interesting chart, and this really says it all. We have to get to this. This is the perception, this is the reality, and this is the story in the middle that needs to be told. Okay. All right, let's move on, shall we? Let's take a look at this guy, Vitalik Buterin. He's really a very unusual looking character. So he has an unusual chart as well. So we're going to take a look at him. Let's see any news here. 23 hours ago. Give some thumbs down to cross-chain application. He proposes multi-dimensional EIP 1559 to solve suboptimal gas fees on Ethereum. Multi-dimensional. Well, when you see this guy, you're going to see the personification of multidimensional. Here's Vitalik Buterin. I mean, he looks freaking otherworldly. Doesn't he look like a geeky version of Tom Brady here? He is the Tom Brady of cryptocurrency. Look at him. That's ridiculous. He doesn't look like that. He looks like that. I think he's a vegan, isn't he? This is, if you're vegan, that's fine. Whatever. Let's see. Let's go back here. It's like the Tom Brady of crypto. He's the GOAT. He likes to wear this shirt. This is his unicorn, alien, and rainbow shirt. Now, that does not cry out Aquarian, I'm not sure what does. So he's an interesting character, and he is probably as important in some ways as the robber barons of the Great Reset, and a lot of the digital currency crypto dealers they're kind of in that camp because they're aligned with where things are going, whether they're Klaus Schwabia or some more decentralized expression. And he's right in the mix with his chart. Let me show you. And this is his birth time. So he is a Capricorn rising. And you can see the stellium in Aquarius here. It's a very strong stellium. Mars, Sun, Venus, and then Mercury at the 28th degree in conjunction with Saturn in Pisces at 0 degrees. What I find interesting about his chart is, just from an astrological perspective, you don't think of him. He's more Venus than he is Mars. I mean, just from an astrological perspective, when you look at that guy, you don't really get Mars, do you? Actually, what you get is Saturn, because Saturn is the one that's out front here. So there's no other. The highest planet in this chart is Jupiter, but in this stellium or this conglomeration of planets, Saturn is the one that's kind of leading the train, and he looks Saturnian. When you see somebody who's Capricorn rising, or sometimes you'll see somebody with Saturn on the ascendant, they have a look about them, and it can be very kind of chiseled and I wouldn't say hard, but it is definitely it's a look that's defined. It has edges. Sometimes you can get also a very odd, non-symmetrical, and I guess it'd be asymmetrical face, right? And he kind of has that as well. Is kind of off a little bit. You'll see that with Saturn sometimes on the ascendant or Capricorn rising. So Saturn is really, in a lot of ways, defining, how he looks. He's a Capricorn rising, and Saturn is the lead dog in this stellium of Aquarius, followed by Neptune and Uranus. And it's interesting because he has this Mercury conjunction with Saturn, which means that even though his Mercury is in scientific and fairly visionary Aquarius, it has traction with Saturn. It'll have this mainstream or grounded kind of traction with Saturn, especially since Saturn is the ruling planet of his chart. But he's definitely more Venus than Mars. Like, he's not. If he had Mars in front of his sun, you would see it. You would see that kind of Mars vitality. That doesn't mean he doesn't have it. He kind of has it, 9-degree orb, but it's behind his sun. What you see more here is Venus, which it's unusual, right? He's got this Sun-Venus conjunction in Aquarius, so he's going to appear to the world to be unusual. He's not threatening. I mean, you don't get a threatening vibe. Even when he tries to look threatening, he doesn't really look all that threatening. He just looks unusual. But he's got that Mars behind him. Don't underestimate him. Do not underestimate this guy, especially because he has a Mars trine with the moon in his chart. So if he feels fired up about something, if he is emotionally invested in something, he will summon the Mars energy here. And you can see where when we had the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, it was just 2 degrees off of his Mars. So being that he's already in the public eye, being that he's already in this discussion of cryptocurrency and Ethereum being an alternative mode of transacting, that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction is playing a role right there on his Mars and will be for the next 20 years. So this is somebody who's not going away. He probably is a bridge in some ways between humans of the past and humans of the future. I don't know if he's augmented. I don't know if he wants to. I don't know anything about him in that way, but he definitely is. He does not look like somebody from, say, the 20th century. He just doesn't. He was born in the 20th century. He was born in 1994, so that makes him a millennial. And he has Pluto up here in the 10th house, which is pretty significant. It's in Scorpio. He has Jupiter in Scorpio. And both of them are in a wide conjunction of the midheaven. So Jupiter-Pluto conjunctions, although they're kind of far, 14 degrees, but hey, same sign, straddling that midheaven, that's money. That's significant money, big money, huge money. And Pluto changes culture, right? That's what it does. And he has true node in Sagittarius. And I think it's interesting now that he's trying to find a way to lighten the load of these gas fees. So the gas fees are the fees that are used to make a transaction with Ethereum. You want to move your money around from one exchange to another exchange, or you want to move your zeros and ones around, you have to pay gas fees. And Ethereum has high gas fees. So what's interesting is he's trying to do something now to lower the gas fees. So he has the south node on his true node, and he's got true node in Sagittarius, which means he's very philosophical. A lot of what he does is philosophically driven. And by the way, this is not a very grounded chart, even though he has Neptune and Uranus in Capricorn. Those are outer planets, and they're in his first house, which make him like super Uranian and super Neptunian. And they trine Virgo, that Virgo moon at 29 degrees. Which is, again, anaretic. There's that word again. Anaretic means it's reached the 29th degree and there's nothing left of that degree. So he does have some grounded energy, but it's not really all that grounded. So he's driven, Vitalik is driven by this true node in Sagittarius, which is more philosophical, more free, more open. I actually think he's got an interesting chart. And I don't think this guy is evil. I don't think he's evil. I don't think his intent is to enslave the world through the use of Ethereum. That's not my sense. He's not like Elon Musk, who I think has a touch of evil in him. This guy's not. He's driven by something else. I think he's driven by the possibility of what can be. He also, I don't think he's afraid to make a lot of money. That much is pretty clear. Now, sometimes with that Sun-Venus square to Jupiter, he can be a dreamer. He can overshoot the mark. I mean, that's what happens when you've got Jupiter squares. You could be a gambler. You can overshoot the mark, but it's still, Jupiter is in the 9th house there. It's in its own planet. So it's in dignity in the 9th house. This guy's a dreamer. I actually think he's interesting. To me, this is an interesting chart. And not that I think he's completely selfless and a great humanitarian. I wouldn't say that, but I would say that he has something driving him that is interesting. It's interesting. To me, this is just look at this Mars sextile to the true node. He is actively pursuing something that's more liberating and free. Now, whether or not he's going to be able to hold on to it, whether or not he's going to, sell out and be a part of, the system. I think it's really hard for Aquarian people to sell out. I mean, they are who they are. They're going to be rebellious and they're going to just move and fork off along a rebellious path. And they usually stay rebellious along the same lines. That's what I've kind of noticed with Aquarians. They stay rebellious along the same line. What's his name? Saul Alinsky's an Aquarian. Did he ever change? Did Saul Alinsky ever have that Paul Saul on the road to Damascus moment? I don't think he did. He was rules of radicals, or rules for radicals, all the way to the end. Did Gene Sharp, the architect of the color revolutions, ever change? No, he never changed. Aquarius is a fixed sign. And if they do change, it's a really big change. Is Ray Kurzweil going to, at some point, just step aside and give up his lifelong dream for synthetic sentience and to be the midwife of the what do you call it? It's in the back of my head now. I had it. The simulacra, the singularity. Right? Is he all of a sudden say, "Hey, look, that singularity shit. I'm not into that anymore. I've moved on. I'm growing an apple orchard." I don't think Ray Kurzweil will ever do that. When you see Aquarians, they generally stay in that lane that they're in. Johnny Rotten, although Johnny Rotten did wear a mask, a little punk. Truly. They're not like Sagittarians. Sagittarians will change. Speaking of change, Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers used to be kind of woke. I remember watching Aaron Rodgers go through this woke phase. I'm like, what? It's almost like once Trump stopped becoming president, Rodgers went in the other direction. The evolution of Aaron Rodgers as a vaccine, a pro-choice, as a pro-choice candidate, very interesting. That's a Sagittarian thing. You see that with Sagittarians. The Sagittarians can go down the path and they can just be the greatest fucking sinners. And all of a sudden they have that come to Jesus moment. And then they're the biggest preachers and zealots. He's not a zealot, by the way, but he's done a Sagittarian turn. That's for damn sure. This Vitalik, he's interesting. And he's going to be a player. He's got Saturn conjuncting his sun right now. So he's going to go through a very interesting period here. He has to remake himself a little bit and trying to find these new gas fees or solution to the gas fees. Like he could just say, fuck it. And like, I'm just here and you have to deal with it, but he's not doing that. I'll look into this a bit more, but I think ultimately he wants to refine Ethereum so that it can be more applicable and not suck up all these gas fees that are part of those transactions. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here with Buterin over the next 6 months when he's got that Sun Saturn Sun Saturn Venus transit going over his chart right around his birthday, by the way. That'll be an interesting time for Mr. Vitalik Buterin, the digital Tom Brady. Okay. So what are we? 10 o'clock. I got a couple more charts I want to show you tonight that I think are interesting. One, I'm going to spend a little less time on, but I'm going to talk about it now because we've been talking about Aquarius. And I have to rename this chart. Hold on. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I will tell you a story that I found interesting about this chart. And let me make sure I have okay. All right. So let me show you this chart. I came across this chart last week, and I did a reading for the son of a friend of mine, and I've known him. I guess I started to know him just as he was going into his junior year in high school. So that would be 3 years now, and he spent. I think I've known him for 4 years. Yeah, I think I got to know him in 2018. So it's 2020, so 4 years. And he's a really interesting young guy. And he's been studying in Poland for the last couple of years. And that had, and I think I played a little bit of a role there in that, because we talked about his schooling and where he could go to school. And it worked out totally great. He got a scholarship and super. This guy's, both boys from this one family are so freaking talented. I've never seen so much talent in two brothers before. I mean, these guys are really fucking talented. They're great athletes. They're great artists. They're musicians. I mean, they're kind of a freak show, and they're good kids. They're not assholes. So I did a reading for him, and he said, "Hey, could you look at somebody that I've met here in Fredericksburg?" And I said, "Sure." And I looked at this chart. Remember, this is a person who is young. They're, Neptune and Aquarius, Pluto's, they're young. So technically a junior in high school. I'm just setting the stage here. And I looked at this chart and I said, wow, this is a very, very unusual person. Very unusual person. And the minute I saw this Sun-Neptune conjunction with, in general, period, and then the midheaven, I'm like, okay, this is not your average junior in high school. So I was trying to articulate that to him about her. And then when you look at her chart, both Neptune and the Sun, with the exception of these biquintiles, are what we call in the conjunction. It's really the conjunction, but they're both close to being singleton, meaning there's no other aspects between them. So when you have something that's singleton, or in this case, I would just put both of them together as being singleton, even though technically they're not, because the conjunction counts as an aspect. But I'm going in that territory. That it's not, those planets aren't being hit or touched by the other luminaries. So they don't get anything positively or negatively. They stand on their own, which is good and bad. The good part of standing alone is that there seems to be this resonance and a reverberation of the singleton planet that makes it unique and special. Like it really stands out. And I've talked about this example before. I used to know somebody very closely who has Mercury and Scorpio singleton, nothing else. And this person, incredibly smart, like really, really smart. But if you were to sit down and talk with her and have a conversation, you would think, oh, intelligent, but maybe not like off the chart smart. And the reason for that is because people wouldn't necessarily tap into that Mercury. They would tap into other things. And even for that person, it may be hard for them to express their Mercury. But that Mercury was brilliant. And so I would see its brilliance on the written word, on a page, in an email, like blown away. In person, you may not see it. That's how singletons work. Sometimes with a transit, they can pop. And so we have here is of a Sun-Neptune conjunction. And this is a young person, lives in a small town here in Texas, right? And from what I understand, very traditional upbringing. With the father there, very traditional upbringing. And when I heard about certain elements around this young person. Well, it confirmed what I thought about this chart. So I'm just going to share the story. And so I asked him how he met her. And he said that, remember, she's a junior in high school and lives in a very conservative town. She said that she astral projected and she met him before she knew him on the astral plane where they embraced. This is what she said. So now I don't know. I do not know how she figured out how to astral project, but this is a chart that could astral project. You've got a Sun Neptune conjunction right through the midheaven, right? Just right out of the body. And then she met him on the astral plane. And no, there's no drugs involved here. To me, this is Aquarius. And I looked at this chart, I'm like, this person is going to be very interesting. In general, I just said, this is an interesting person. But in terms of like culture, very interesting. You don't get this kind of conjunction like this very often. Not with Sun Neptune in Aquarius. Now, there would be some Sun Neptune conjunctions because Neptune was in Aquarius for, what was it, 12 years. But you won't get them that close. You won't get them that close to the midheaven, and you won't get them singleton out, with the biquintiles being the only thing that is connecting them with some other luminaries. This is very unique. Trust me. So when I saw this chart, I knew that I was dealing with a very unique individual, even though I've never met this individual. And when I heard that story, it was like, bingo. When I see this, I see somebody who will have an impact on the world in a very positive way. To me, this is a spiritual teacher. This person is a spiritual teacher and spiritually gifted. It's not without some struggle or challenge. Venus, Pluto square, it can be tricky. Mars and Aries, which I like, squaring Mercury and Chiron in Capricorn. Could be good on a debate team, maybe. But those planets are hit ninth house, maybe. Mercury ninth house. For me, though, it's really this Sun-Neptune conjunction. Good grand trine. Jupiter, 17. Mercury, Chiron, 1921. Right, there's that moon. Wow, moon conjunct Algol. Very intense, but grounded. There's some grounded elements here with this chart. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating stuff. So when I heard this story about astral projecting and meeting him before she met him on the astral plane, which I don't think is bullshit. I don't think it's a bullshit story. These Pluto and Sag kids have a hard time lying, by the way. These Gen Zers have a difficult time telling a fib. So she wants to learn more about astrology. I bet you she'll be really good at it. Really, really good at it. Okay, I just wanted to show you that one. Now, here's the other chart that I thought was interesting. So these are two of my clients, and what I will say about them is that they could pass for sisters, and they're a mother-daughter, and they could pass for sisters. So that tells you something about the youthful quality of the mother, at the very least. So this is the chart that I looked at and said to myself, could this be a twin soul or a twin flame chart as it relates to a mother and daughter relationship? I'd never really wrapped my head around the possibility for that. Well, they came to me because they wanted to understand more about their connection as two individuals, because they're so close. They complete each other's sentences all the time. That's how close they are. So I said, okay, well, we'll look at this. And the first thing that really jumped out at me. So when I do like a couples reading, what I'm looking for is I'm looking for conjunctions with nodes. So automatically we see this true node, and this is the daughter on the inside, the mother's on the outside. So we see this true node conjunct Mercury and Venus. Now, if this was a relationship where two people are thinking about being together, I would say, wow, that's really great. This is what you want to look for in a synastry chart. By the way, it's called synastry for those of you who aren't aware of it. So there's that, right? And then there's this Chiron conjunction with the South Node, which is very past lifey and has a lot to do with healing. And I don't want to get into their story too much, but I can assure you that the daughter has played a significant healing role in the mother's life. I'm just going to leave it at that. And so significant that the crisis that she had to deal with moved her from going to college and having like a college life and a life after college to coming home and having to deal with the crisis in the family. And so we have this Chiron South Node conjunction, which again tends to be South Node, very kind of past lifey, right? I mean, that's how we think of the South Node. And Chiron coming in almost like, I'm here to take care of something from that time. And the present would be the true node conjunct Venus here. Very, very connected, very positive, like something that have to work out. And here, this is the third house, which has a lot to do with what? Sisters. It's sisterly. It's fraternal, right? This is what the third house represents. So yeah, the sister thing could be there, but I think there's something even more here. So let's go to the other side of the chart. Now, what's fascinating is that we have Venus South Node, Libra, Mars South Node, Aries. So here comes the mom, right, coming in and conjuncting Mars. It's like, wow. Right. So again, we have this Venus South Node conjunction, Mars South Node conjunction. So fascinating stuff. And then each one is bringing the true node into these areas that are opposite. And I don't use the word deficient. That's really not quite the word I would use. But when you do get into the South Node, it's that concave of the chart, right? It's kind of bottomed out, and you're not really supposed to hang out there. I mean, you could draw influence from it, but really where you want to be is you want to be, over here. You want to be here, right? So mom would want to be over here doing the Aries thing, which is being assertive, which is being independent, which honestly, she's had to do that. That doesn't mean that she can't have connection, relationship, but that's not really ultimately how she's supposed to discover and actualize. It's because it's through the true node in Aries, which is about independence. And here we have the daughter with Mars in the South Node, meaning that she still has Mars lessons to learn and go through in this life. It's almost as if she kind of, who has this is Ricky Williams, the football player. He's got a South Node Mars conjunction. in his chart. So he had to be a football player. Like that's how he worked it out. I think Ricky's got a Venus Mars conjunction, if I'm not mistaken. And I think they're in, is it Taurus? I think it's Taurus or Gemini. Ricky's a Gemini. So I think it's Gemini. I think it's Venus and Gemini. So she's got, warrior energy, self-assertive energy, and lessons that she has to work out still. And it's through her mother that she'll work them out. Right? It's very interesting. And then you have Saturn Chiron here. Like, it's like, wow, Saturn being like the teacher. This is like the daughter is the teacher. And, in some ways allowing the mother to, again, feel vulnerable with Chiron and Aries. And then you have the Saturn Sun conjunction. It's like this chart is so entangled here in these two areas between these two women. And when I saw this, it kind of blew my mind. And it's a symbiosis that I think goes beyond family. It really goes beyond family. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating stuff. I mean, I could just stop there and like, okay, we're good, we're done, right? But there's some other things with the chart that I think are also quite interesting. We both have Moon, Venus, and Gemini, so there's going to be, the Gemini kind of way of understanding. And again, we're dealing with siblings and twins, right? The whole idea of this twin soul thing begins to come up again. So there's that. The oppositions are interesting. We got some squares going on, and they may come into play when the second Saturn return comes in for mom. But by and large, I think this is a chart that is incredibly symbiotic and highly unusual. It almost defies some kind of definition. Mother, daughter, sister, parts of the same soul. It defies definition here. Very unique. And in a lot of ways, even this is inspiring. And seeing how they've kind of rallied together for one another in their individual lives, and also in the family life as well. Fascinating stuff. And like I said, if this was a chart between two people that were interested in one another as, love partners, I would say, well, this chart's worth exploring. It's definitely worth exploring. So anyway, I just wanted to share with you because it stretches. When I saw this chart, it stretched literally. You can see it right here, like with the opposition. It just stretched the idea of, what we think of as like a twin soul or a twin flame. That it wouldn't fit that definition, because we see that definition played out in coupling and partnering. Here, it's within one family and shared between a mother and a daughter. And I think, quite honestly, it's very possible. Very, very possible. And, I got to say that when they were at I've seen them in public, right, together, and they almost act, they're almost like one being when they're together. It's not in a bad way. It's not creepy. Trust me. It's not creepy. It's just really interesting. Very, very interesting. And they gave me permission to talk about it. So I want to thank them for that. All right. I think we're going to pull this train into the station here tonight. We took a little bit of a different path tonight. We looked at some individual charts, which is always fun. We didn't go for the huge, big picture charts, but sometimes it's good to get into astrology and look at some of these things and, how they apply to people's charts, and especially the last chart, which is like really fascinating. Totally, totally fascinating. I do want to do Ray Parker's chart, but I'm not going to do it tonight. I'm going to try and set it up so I can make a case for his chart. And I'm always blown away by when people will say, oh, astrology is bullshit, or you can't predict anything. And when you see some of the stories that I've seen, or you could see some of the mundane analogies or the analogies for a person in their chart, or not even just an analogy, but how they actually get played out. It's fucking fascinating, really fascinating. And it's like, there's a there. You may want to look at the there. Now, do you want to live your life 24/7? By figuring out where the moon is in any relationship. Because really, if you want to, you could look at where the moon is at any given time and say, there's going to be a relationship with the moon to another planet in your chart. And if you lived that way, you'd be loony, right? So there are some people that are that granular with astrology. I'm not. So, but I do think that there are some very interesting components and elements that get played out all the time. So, and even in my chart, like when my son went to progressed zero Sag, I could kind of feel a difference because my son had been progressed Scorpio for the last 30 fucking years. Right. And I've gone through some scorpionic stuff. So I'm ready for a little Sag. I got Jupiter on my right hand shoulder. Anyway, thanks for being here. Appreciate you. Back tomorrow over on 15 Minutes of Flame. Tonight is the last night. I've got 1 week. So after Friday, the course goes back to its regular price. You get 15% off now. That's Jasper 22. If you want to get it, you get a natal chart and you get a natal report. I got a few I have to send out still. So I know some of you folks, I'm going to catch up with you. I promise. But this is the last week. If you want to start your year off and learn some astrology, here's a good place to do that. And the cryptocurrency webinar with Misaki will be available to the end of the month. Misaki tells me that there's going to be a time to buy shortly. So you may want to avail yourself of that. Well, there it is. Thanks for being here. Love to you all. And we'll see you tomorrow over on the 15 Minutes of Flame side of things. Let me say goodnight to, oh, by the way, hats fucking off to Jimmy Garoppolo. I just have to say this before we go. Jimmy Garoppolo is the quarterback for the 49ers. And I don't watch football, although today I was watching the score on my phone. And he's a total Scorpio. He sucked for half the game. And then he got into the Scorpion and clinch at the end of the game. He won the fucking game for him. Jimmy Garoppolo, hats off to you. Good job. Well done. You were credit to your sign. All right, here we go. And we had a good night tonight here. Good group. All right. Take care, one and all.